One morning around 7 a.m., a neighbor called the police to report a smoke alarm going off at a nearby house. An officer soon arrived, and after knocking several times with no response, he tried the door and found it unlocked. As he cautiously inspected each room, he made his way upstairs. What he found in the first bedroom sent chills down his spine. Inside, he found a body that appeared to be that of a teenage girl. Realizing he had discovered a crime scene, he immediately called for backup. More bodies were soon uncovered, and the investigation began to unravel the dark events that had taken place and why anyone would harm such a lovely family. This is the horrifying case of the Harris family. In today's video, we take a look at a case that took place in the town of Dryden in New York during the holiday season that involved Warren Harris and his family. For 39-year-old Warren Harris, also known as Tony, his 41-year-old wife Dolores, also known as Dodie, and their children, 15-year-old Shelby and 11-year-old Mark, Christmas had always been a cherished time, and the 1989 holiday season was no different. Dodie ran a gift shop in a renovated barn about 50 yards from their main home, while Tony held an executive position at an electronics distribution center. Their expansive house in the town of Dryden was fully decorated in anticipation of the upcoming festivities, and they went out of their way to make sure that family, friends, and visitors felt welcome. On Friday, December 22nd, Dodie spent most of the day alone. Around 4 p.m., the kids came home from school. The Finger Lakes region of New York was blanketed in snow, with more expected. As usual, the children relaxed in front of the TV while Dodie prepared dinner. Tony was expected home by about 5:30, and the afternoon was passing by swiftly. It was during this brief 90-minute window, when the three of them were alone in the house, that a killer made their move. While the exact trigger for the ensuing nightmare remains unknown, it is suspected that the ordeal began when someone knocked on the door seeking assistance. Those who knew Dodie well agreed that she would have readily allowed a stranger into the house to use the phone. It is believed that Tony arrived just as the terrifying events were unfolding. Overwhelmed and caught off guard by the horrifying events that were happening, he was unable to protect his loved ones. What is known is that by the end of the night, the sole survivor of the Harris family was a kitten named Shadow. Around 7 a.m. the following day, a neighbor called the police to report a smoke alarm going off at the Harris home. By 7:30, an officer arrived at 1886 Ellis Hollow Road. After several unanswered knocks, the officer tried the door and found it unlocked. Upon entering, he smelled a faint hint of smoke, similar to what one might expect from a kitchen accident. It was only when he saw a gas can in the living room that he suspected the fire might have been intentionally started. As he moved through the seemingly deserted house, he observed that the power was out and the phone lines were cut. The oppressive silence throughout the rooms created an unsettling atmosphere, suggesting that if anyone else was present, they were no longer alive. After carefully ascending the stairs, he peered into the first bedroom and made a harrowing discovery. Inside the scorched room lay the body of what appeared to be a teenage girl. Realizing he had encountered a crime scene, he promptly called for backup. While awaiting reinforcements, the officer surveyed the room, taking care not to disturb the evidence. It was clear from the girl's condition that she had been shot in the head, and her partial nudity suggested she had been sexually assaulted. Although she was not restrained, she was blindfolded. Next to her on the floor was the body of a dog, deceased, but without visible signs of trauma. When the officer moved to a nearby bedroom, he found 3 more victims, 2 adults and a child. All had been hogtied and shot execution style with pillowcases over their heads. Despite signs of burning, the damage to the bodies was minimal. By the end of the morning, the victims were confirmed to be Tony, Dodie, Shelby, and Mark Harris. As detectives searched the property for evidence, they noted that the family's van was missing from the garage. Later that day, the vehicle was discovered abandoned in a local mall parking lot, likely by the perpetrator or perpetrators. The medical examiner determined that Shelby had been tortured and sexually assaulted before being killed. It was estimated that the family's suffering had lasted from around 6 to 10 p.m. Investigators found that gasoline had been poured upstairs and set ablaze to destroy evidence, but the fire had mostly extinguished itself, preserving much of the crime scene. Curiously, it appeared that the murder sites had been thoroughly cleaned afterward, leading detectives to suspect that the perpetrator or perpetrators might have had professional janitorial experience. During interviews with the neighbors, One recalled seeing a black male on a bicycle riding up and down the street just before dark the previous evening. Since it got dark around 5 p.m, this would place the cyclist near the Harris home while Dodie and her children were preparing for dinner. Given that the only tire tracks in the freshly fallen snow were from the family's van, it seemed probable that the killer arrived by a different mode of transportation. Earlier that evening, a woman driving home with her young child had noticed a man matching the description struggling on his bike along the snowy highway. Although she had considered offering him a ride, she decided against it due to her fussy toddler. Unbeknownst to her at the time, her decision likely spared her life. When the news of the murders spread, investigators also discovered that the family's credit cards had been used to buy hundreds of dollars worth of clothing, jewelry, and electronics at the mall where the van was found. After interviewing the clerks who processed the transactions, a composite sketch of the suspects was created. Once these images were shared with the public, tips identified the suspects as 54-year-old Shirley King and her 33-year-old son, Michael, who also went by the name Anthony Turner. Investigations revealed that Shirley worked part-time as a house cleaner and at the reservation desk of a well-known bed and breakfast. Her son, who had worked intermittently as a janitor, had a criminal record showing a preference for robbery over conventional employment. As the investigation progressed, another neighbor came forward, reporting that he had seen a black male with an older female driving the Harris's van past his house at 6:50 a.m. After seeing the sketches of Michael and Shirley King, he confirmed they were the individuals he had observed. Since this sighting occurred just minutes before the police were alerted about the smoke alarm, it was considered a significant lead. Unfortunately for the investigators, the witness later retracted his statement, admitting he hadn't seen the two clearly enough to make a reliable identification. On February 7, 1990, police went to the apartment where Michael King was living with his girlfriend and their 2-year-old child. When he did not respond to their knock, they forced entry. Inside, they found King sitting with a shotgun. He fired a shot before being gunned down by the officers. A ballistics expert later confirmed that King's weapon was the same one used to kill the Harris family. While some doubted the details of the confrontation, King's history with law enforcement provided insight into his mindset. It was reported that after one of his many encounters with police, he had allegedly expressed a desire to be shot by them rather than face a long prison sentence, suggesting he had chosen suicide by cop. With the main suspect out of the way, detectives shifted their focus to his mother, Shirley. Although both had been spotted at the mall using the Harris's credit cards, it was Shirley who had forged Dodie's name on the receipts. When confronted with this incriminating evidence, she admitted to using the cards and knowing their source but denied any involvement in the murders. Nonetheless, her knowledge of the killings for 6 weeks led to speculation about her deeper involvement. After considering their options, authorities charged her with burglary, arson, possession of stolen property, and forgery. While investigators believed Shirley had been present at the crime scene at some point, they were not fully convinced of her role in the actual murders. If she was involved, it seemed more likely that she was an accessory after the fact rather than a direct participant in the violence. During the trial, a gas can found at the Harris home on the morning the bodies were discovered was presented as evidence. An officer testified that fingerprints on the can matched those of Shirley King. With undeniable proof of her presence at the crime scene, the jury quickly convicted her on all charges. Shirley was sentenced to 17 to 44 years in prison and was formally handed over to the state, closing the case. However, 2.5 years later, an internal investigation revealed that the law enforcement officer had planted the fingerprint evidence to strengthen the case against Shirley King. Following this explosive revelation, Shirley King's conviction was overturned and she was released from custody. In the subsequent months, all charges against her were dropped and her previous convictions were annulled. In 2007, Shirley King filed a lawsuit against the state of New York for $500 million. Ultimately, she received around $286,000 in compensatory damages. Although she had indeed been wronged, some in the community resented the large settlement. They argued that she had benefited from her son's crimes without showing any remorse for the victims, questioning her entitlement to such a significant payout. Despite this, the decision remained, and she left with the money. Years went by, and Shirley King passed away in 2015 at the age of 80, taking any remaining secrets with her to the grave. Although the complete details of what the Harris family experienced during their final hours will never be fully known, it was unquestionably a night of unrelenting terror. After examining the evidence, it is clear that their suffering at the hands of a stranger they had welcomed into their home out of kindness is truly horrifying. The thought that Tony, Dodie, and Mark were forced to hear Shelby being assaulted in the next room only intensifies the heart-wrenching nature of their ordeal. Demonstrating that animals can sometimes show more compassion than people, the family dog, Annie, chose to remain by Shelby's side rather than seeking safety as flames engulfed the home's second floor. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Annie stayed close to the teenager she had loved and known, choosing to offer comfort rather than escape. Unfortunately, after staying by her side all night, she eventually succumbed to smoke inhalation. It is both tragic and heart-wrenching what the victims of this story endured at the hands of these monsters, despite the kindness extended to them by their hosts. As we reflect on this sorrowful tale, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were cruelly taken and the loved ones who mourn their loss. If you found this video compelling, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos. Thank you for watching.